the new god of longevity, the new gods of longevity, the new god of longevity, the new goddess of longevity, the new goddesses of longevity, the new goddess of longevity, the old god of longevity, the old gods of longevity, the old god of longevity, the old goddess of longevity, the old goddesses of longevity, the old goddess of longevity, the greater god of longevity, the greater gods of longevity, the greater god of longevity, the greater goddess of longevity, the greater goddesses of longevity, the greater goddess of longevity, the lesser god of longevity, the lesser gods of longevity, the lesser god of longevity, the lesser goddess of longevity, the lesser goddesses of longevity, the lesser goddess of longevity, the higher god of longevity, the higher gods of longevity, the higher god of longevity, the higher goddess of longevity, the higher goddesses of longevity, the higher goddess of longevity, the lower god of longevity, the lower gods of longevity, the lower god of longevity, the lower goddess of longevity, the lower goddesses of longevity, the lower goddess of longevity, the greater spirit of longevity, the greater spirits of longevity, the greater spirit of longevity, the lesser spirit of longevity, the lesser spirits of longevity, the lesser spirit of longevity, the higher spirit of longevity, the higher spirits of longevity, the higher spirit of longevity, the lower spirit of longevity, the lower spirits of longevity, the lower spirit of longevity, the major god of longevity, the major gods of longevity, the major god of longevity, the major goddess of longevity, the major goddesses of longevity, the major goddess of longevity, the minor god of longevity, the minor gods of longevity, the minor god of longevity, the minor goddess of longevity, the minor goddesses of longevity, the minor goddess of longevity, the superior god of longevity, the superior gods of longevity, the superior god of longevity, the superior goddess of longevity, the superior goddesses of longevity, the superior goddess of longevity, the inferior god of longevity, the inferior gods of longevity, the inferior god of longevity, the inferior goddess of longevity, the inferior goddesses of longevity, the inferior goddess of longevity, the ancestor god of longevity, the ancestor gods of longevity, the ancestor god of longevity, the ancestor goddess of longevity, the ancestor goddesses of longevity, the ancestor goddess of longevity, the ascendant god of longevity, the ascendant gods of longevity, the ascendant god of longevity, the ascendant goddess of longevity, the ascendant goddesses of longevity, the ascendant goddess of longevity, the descendant god of longevity, the descendant gods of longevity, the descendant god of longevity, the descendant goddess of longevity, the descendant goddesses of longevity, the descendant goddess of longevity, the transcendent god of longevity, the transcendent gods of longevity, the transcendent god of longevity, the transcendent goddess of longevity, the transcendent goddesses of longevity, the transcendent goddess of longevity, the past god of longevity, the past gods of longevity, the past god of longevity, the past goddess of longevity, the past goddesses of longevity, the past goddess of longevity, the present god of longevity, the present gods of longevity, the present god of longevity, the present goddess of longevity, the present goddesses of longevity, the present goddess of longevity, the future god of longevity, the future gods of longevity, the future god of longevity, the future goddess of longevity, the future goddesses of longevity, the future goddess of longevity, the authentic god of longevity, the authentic gods of longevity, the authentic god of longevity, the authentic goddess of longevity, the authentic goddesses of longevity, the authentic goddess of longevity, the synthetic god of longevity, the synthetic gods of longevity, the synthetic god of longevity, the synthetic goddess of longevity, the synthetic goddesses of longevity, the synthetic goddess of longevity, the progressive god of longevity, the progressive gods of longevity, the progressive god of longevity, the progressive goddess of longevity, the progressive goddesses of longevity, the progressive goddess of longevity, the regressive god of longevity, the regressive gods of longevity, the regressive god of longevity, the regressive goddess of longevity, the regressive goddesses of longevity, the regressive goddess of longevity, the ordinary god of longevity, the ordinary gods of longevity, the ordinary god of longevity, the ordinary goddess of longevity, the ordinary goddesses of longevity, the ordinary goddess of longevity, the extraordinary god of longevity, the extraordinary gods of longevity, the extraordinary god of longevity, the extraordinary goddess of longevity, the extraordinary goddesses of longevity, the extraordinary goddess of longevity, the static god of longevity, the static gods of longevity, the static god of longevity, the static goddess of longevity, the static goddesses of longevity, the static goddess of longevity, the dynamic god of longevity, the dynamic gods of longevity, the dynamic god of longevity, the dynamic goddess of longevity, the dynamic goddesses of longevity, the dynamic goddess of longevity, the land god of longevity, the land gods of longevity, the land god of longevity, the land goddess of longevity, the land goddesses of longevity, the land goddess of longevity, the sea god of longevity, the sea gods of longevity, the sea god of longevity, the sea goddess of longevity, the sea goddesses of longevity, the sea goddess of longevity, the sky god of longevity, the sky gods of longevity, the sky god of longevity, the sky goddess of longevity, the sky goddesses of longevity, the sky goddess of longevity, the god of longevity, the gods of longevity, the god of longevity, the goddess of longevity, the goddesses of longevity, the goddess of longevity, the half god of longevity, the half gods of longevity, the half god of longevity, the half goddess of longevity, the half goddesses of longevity, the half goddess of longevity, the vessel of longevity, the vessels of longevity, the vessel of longevity, the name of longevity, the names of longevity, the name of longevity, the person of longevity, the persons of longevity, the person of longevity, the persona of longevity, the personas of longevity, the persona of longevity, the personage of longevity, the personages of longevity, the personage of longevity, the personality of longevity, the personalities of longevity, the personality of longevity, the personification of longevity, the personifications of longevity, the personification of longevity, the image of longevity, the images of longevity, the image of longevity, the imagination of longevity, the imaginations of longevity, the imagination of longevity, the belief of longevity, the beliefs of longevity, the belief of longevity, the thought of longevity, the thoughts of longevity, the thought of longevity, the word of longevity, the words of longevity, the word of longevity, the action of longevity, the actions of longevity, the action of longevity, the reaction of longevity, the reactions of longevity, the reaction of longevity, the feeling of longevity, the feelings of longevity, the feeling of longevity, the situation of longevity, the situations of longevity, the situation of longevity, the circumstance of longevity, the circumstances of longevity, the circumstance of longevity, the environment of longevity, the environments of longevity, the environment of longevity, the relationship of longevity, the relationships of longevity, the relationship of longevity, the number of longevity, the numbers of longevity, the number of longevity, the formula of longevity, the formulas of longevity, the formula of longevity, the equation of longevity, the equations of longevity, the equation of longevity, the theory of longevity, the theories of longevity, the theory of longevity, the symbol of longevity, the symbols of longevity, the symbol of longevity, the color of longevity, the colors of longevity, the color of longevity, the thing of longevity, the things of longevity, the thing of longevity, the way of longevity, the ways of longevity, the way of longevity, the place of longevity, the places of longevity, the place of longevity, the time of longevity, the times of longevity, the time of longevity, the event of longevity, the events of longevity, the event of longevity, the result of longevity, the results of longevity, the result of longevity, the crown of longevity, the crowns of longevity, the crown of longevity, the throne of longevity, the thrones of longevity, the throne of longevity, the longevity king, the longevity kings, the longevity kingdom, the longevity kingdoms, the longevity king subject, the longevity king subjects, the longevity king's dominion, the longevity king's dominions, the kingdom of longevity, the kingdoms of longevity, the kingdom of longevity, the longevity queen, the longevity queens, the longevity queendom, the longevity queendoms, the longevity queen subject, the longevity queen subjects, the longevity queen's dominion, the longevity queen's dominions, the queendom of longevity, the queendoms of longevity, the queendom of longevity, the longevity prince, the longevity princes, the longevity princedom, the longevity princedoms, the longevity prince is subject, the longevity prince is subjects, the longevity prince is dominion, the longevity prince is dominions, the princedom of longevity, the princedoms of longevity, the princedom of longevity, the longevity princess, the longevity princesses, the longevity princessdom, the longevity princessdoms, the longevity princess is subject, the longevity princess is subjects, the longevity princess is dominion, the longevity princess is dominions, the princessdom of longevity, the princessdoms of longevity, the princessdom of longevity, the lord of longevity, the lords of longevity, the lord of longevity, the lordess of longevity, the lordesses of longevity, the lordess of longevity, the priest of longevity, the priests of longevity, the priest of longevity, the priestess of longevity, the priestesses of longevity, the priestess of longevity, the ritual of longevity, the rituals of longevity, the ritual of longevity, the shrine of longevity, the shrines of longevity, the shrine of longevity, the temple of longevity, the temples of longevity, the temple of longevity, the leader of longevity, the leaders of longevity, the leader of longevity, the follower of longevity, the followers of longevity, the follower of longevity, the natural substance of longevity, the natural substances of longevity, the natural substance of longevity, the supernatural substance of longevity, the supernatural substances of longevity, the supernatural substance of longevity, the temporal substance of longevity, the temporal substances of longevity, the temporal substance of longevity, the spiritual substance of longevity, the spiritual substances of longevity, the spiritual substance of longevity, the natural form of longevity, the natural forms of longevity, the natural form of longevity, the supernatural form of longevity, the supernatural forms of longevity, the supernatural form of longevity, the temporal form of longevity, the temporal forms of longevity, the temporal form of longevity, the spiritual form of longevity, the spiritual forms of longevity, the spiritual form of longevity, the age of longevity, the ages of longevity, the age of longevity, the era of longevity, the heiress of longevity, the era of longevity, the awakener of longevity, the awakeners of longevity, the awakener of longevity, the awakening of longevity, the awakenings of longevity, the awakening of longevity, the realm of longevity, the realms of longevity, the realm of longevity, the dimension of longevity, the dimensions of longevity, the dimension of longevity, the zone of longevity, the zones of longevity, the zone of longevity, the frequency of longevity, the frequencies of longevity, the frequency of longevity, the century of longevity, the centuries of longevity, the century of longevity, the millennium of longevity, the millenniums of longevity, the millennium of longevity, the purpose of longevity, the purposes of longevity, the purpose of longevity, the meaning of longevity, the meanings of longevity, the meaning of longevity, the culture of longevity, the cultures of longevity, the culture of longevity, the demonstrator of longevity, the demonstrators of longevity, the demonstrator of longevity, the demonstration of longevity, the demonstrations of longevity, the demonstration of longevity, the manifester of longevity, the manifestors of longevity, the manifester of longevity, the manifestation of longevity, the manifestations of longevity, the manifestation of longevity, the presence of longevity, the presences of longevity, the presence of longevity, the glow of longevity, the glows of longevity, the glow of longevity, the goal of longevity, the goals of longevity, the goal of longevity, the plan of longevity, the plans of longevity, the plan of longevity, the book of longevity, the books of longevity, the book of longevity, the philosopher of longevity, the philosophers of longevity, the philosopher of longevity, the philosophy of longevity, the philosophies of longevity, the philosophy of longevity, the releaser of longevity, the releasers of longevity, the releaser of longevity, the release of longevity, the releases of longevity, the release of longevity, the variable of longevity, the variables of longevity, the variable of longevity, the cause of longevity, the causes of longevity, the cause of longevity, the effect of longevity, the effects of longevity, the effect of longevity, the journey of longevity, the journeys of longevity, the journey of longevity, the emergence of longevity, the emergences of longevity, the emergence of longevity, the source of longevity, the sources of longevity, the source of longevity, the originator of longevity, the originators of longevity, the originator of longevity, the origin of longevity, the origins of longevity, the origin of longevity, the forefather of longevity, the forefathers of longevity, the forefather of longevity, the foremother of longevity, the foremothers of longevity, the foremother of longevity, the ancestor of longevity, the ancestors of longevity, the ancestor of longevity, the descendant of longevity, the descendants of longevity, the descendant of longevity, the lineage of longevity, the lineages of longevity, the lineage of longevity, the heritage of longevity, the heritages of longevity, the heritage of longevity, the heir of longevity, the heirs of longevity, the heir of longevity, the co-heir of longevity, the co-heirs of longevity, the co-heir of longevity, the joint heir of longevity, the joint heirs of longevity, the joint heir of longevity, the dynasty of longevity, the dynasties of longevity, the dynasty of longevity, the force of longevity, the forces of longevity, the force of longevity, the law of longevity, the laws of longevity, the law of longevity, the pact of longevity, the pacts of longevity, the pact of longevity, the game of longevity, the games of longevity, the game of longevity, the mask of longevity, the masks of longevity, the mask of longevity, the armor of longevity, the armors of longevity, the armor of longevity, the sword of longevity, the swords of longevity, the sword of longevity, the shield of longevity, the shields of longevity, the shield of longevity, the force shield of longevity, the force shields of longevity, the force shield of longevity, the armored force shield of longevity, the armored force shields of longevity, the armored force shield of longevity, the champion of longevity, the champions of longevity, the champion of longevity, the guardian of longevity, the guardians of longevity, the guardian of longevity, the defender of longevity, the defenders of longevity, the defender of longevity, the protector of longevity, the protectors of longevity, the protector of longevity, the chant of longevity, the chants of longevity, the chant of longevity, the shape of longevity, the shapes of longevity, the shape of longevity, the cube of longevity, the cubes of longevity, the cube of longevity, the cuboid of longevity, the cuboids of longevity, the cuboid of longevity, the sphere of longevity, the spheres of longevity, the sphere of longevity, the spheroid of longevity, the spheroids of longevity, the spheroid of longevity, the prism of longevity, the prisms of longevity, the prism of longevity, the pyramid of longevity, the pyramids of longevity, the pyramid of longevity, the cylinder of longevity, the cylinders of longevity, the cylinder of longevity, the cone of longevity, the cones of longevity, the cone of longevity, the triangle of longevity, the triangles of longevity, the triangle of longevity, the circle of longevity, the circles of longevity, the circle of longevity, the semicircle of longevity, the semicircles of longevity, the semicircle of longevity, the square of longevity, the squares of longevity, the square of longevity, the rectangle of longevity, the rectangles of longevity, the rectangle of longevity, the parallelogram of longevity, the parallelograms of longevity, the parallelogram of longevity, the rhombus of longevity, the rhombuses of longevity, the rhombus of longevity, the trapezoid of longevity, the trapezoids of longevity, the trapezoid of longevity, the polygon of longevity, the polygons of longevity, the polygon of longevity, the pentagon of longevity, the pentagons of longevity, the pentagon of longevity, the hexagon of longevity, the hexagons of longevity, the hexagon of longevity, the septagon of longevity, the septagons of longevity, the septagon of longevity, the octagon of longevity, the octagons of longevity, the octagon of longevity, the nonagon of longevity, the nonagons of longevity, the nonagon of longevity, the decagon of longevity, the decagons of longevity, the decagon of longevity, the evolution of longevity, the evolutions of longevity, the evolution of longevity, the revolution of longevity, the revolutions of longevity, the revolution of longevity, the elemental art of longevity, the elemental arts of longevity, the elemental art of longevity, the elemental science of longevity, the elemental sciences of longevity, the elemental science of longevity, the elemental principle of longevity, the elemental principles of longevity, the elemental principle of longevity, the elemental technology of longevity, the elemental technologies of longevity, the elemental technology of longevity, the low elemental art of longevity, the low elemental arts of longevity, the low elemental art of longevity, the low elemental science of longevity, the low elemental sciences of longevity, the low elemental science of longevity, the low elemental principle of longevity, the low elemental principles of longevity, the low elemental principle of longevity, the low elemental technology of longevity, the low elemental technologies of longevity, the low elemental technology of longevity, the high elemental art of longevity, the high elemental arts of longevity, the high elemental art of longevity, the high elemental science of longevity, the high elemental sciences of longevity, the high elemental science of longevity, the high elemental principle of longevity, the high elemental principles of longevity, the high elemental principle of longevity, the high elemental technology of longevity, the high elemental technologies of longevity, the high elemental technology of longevity, the agent of longevity, the agents of longevity, the agent of longevity, the agency of longevity, the agencies of longevity, the agency of longevity, the amplifier of longevity, the amplifiers of longevity, the amplifier of longevity, the amplification of longevity, the amplifications of longevity, the amplification of longevity, the enhancer of longevity, the enhancers of longevity, the enhancer of longevity, the enhancement of longevity, the enhancements of longevity, the enhancement of longevity, the magnifier of longevity, the magnifiers of longevity, the magnifier of longevity, the magnification of longevity, The magnifications of longevity. The magnification of longevity. The influencer of longevity. The influencers of longevity. The influencer of longevity. The influence of longevity. The influences of longevity. The influence of longevity. The emanator of longevity. The emanators of longevity. The emanator of longevity. The emanation of longevity. The emanations of longevity. The emanation of longevity. The converger of longevity. The convergers of longevity. The converger of longevity. The convergence of longevity. The convergences of longevity. The convergence of longevity. The aura of longevity. The auras of longevity. The aura of longevity. The impression of longevity. The impressions of longevity. The impression of longevity. The intelligence of longevity. The intelligences of longevity. The intelligence of longevity. The sophistication of longevity. The sophistications of longevity. The sophistication of longevity. The genius of longevity. The geniuses of longevity. The genius of longevity. The polymath of longevity. The polymaths of longevity. The polymath of longevity. The psychic of longevity. The psychics of longevity. The psychic of longevity. The knowledge of longevity. The knowledges of longevity. The knowledge of longevity. The understanding of longevity. The understandings of longevity. The understanding of longevity. The wisdom of longevity. The wisdoms of longevity. The wisdom of longevity. The secret of longevity. The secrets of longevity. The secret of longevity. The mystery of longevity. The mysteries of longevity. The mystery of longevity. The revelation of longevity. The revelations of longevity. The revelation of longevity. The tactic of longevity. The tactics of longevity. The tactic of longevity. The strategy of longevity. The strategies of longevity. The strategy of longevity. The strength of longevity. The strengths of longevity. The strength of longevity. The might of longevity. The mights of longevity. The might of longevity. The power of longevity. The powers of longevity. The power of longevity. The authority of longevity. The authorities of longevity. The authority of longevity. The dominion of longevity. The dominions of longevity. The dominion of longevity. The rhythm of longevity. The rhythms of longevity. The rhythm of longevity. The melody of longevity. The melodies of longevity. The melody of longevity. The music of longevity. The musics of longevity. The music of longevity. The lyric of longevity. The lyrics of longevity. The lyric of longevity. The song of longevity. The songs of longevity. The song of longevity. The dance of longevity. The dances of longevity. The dance of longevity. The spirit of longevity. The spirits of longevity. The spirit of longevity. The soul of longevity. The souls of longevity. The soul of longevity. The body of longevity. The bodies of longevity. The body of longevity. The mark of longevity. The marks of longevity. The mark of longevity. The promise of longevity. The promises of longevity. The promise of longevity. The visionary of longevity. The visionaries of longevity. The visionary of longevity. The vision of longevity. The visions of longevity. The vision of longevity. The picture of longevity. The pictures of longevity. The picture of longevity. The sound of longevity. The sounds of longevity. The sound of longevity. The dung of longevity. The dungs of longevity. The dung of longevity. The language of longevity. The languages of longevity. The language of longevity. The communication of longevity. The communications of longevity. The communication of longevity. The people of longevity. The peoples of longevity. The people of longevity. The society of longevity. The societies of longevity. The society of longevity. The fortress of longevity. The fortresses of longevity. The fortress of longevity. The government of longevity. The governments of longevity. The government of longevity. The city of longevity. The cities of longevity. The city of longevity. The nation of longevity. The nations of longevity. The nation of longevity. the civilization of longevity, the civilizations of longevity, the civilization of longevity, the world of longevity, the worlds of longevity, the world of longevity,